going on, everybody? Aaron Nagler here, Cheesehead TV, talking to tape wizard Ben Fennell. Ben, how are you today, man?
I am doing just dandy. It's early February. We got the draft and the combine ahead. Super Bowl's
Let's
just a
go.
week away. It's a great time to be alive in the football world.
It is. It is. And we got the Senior Bowl wrapping up. Obviously the game is on Saturday, final practice today. I think it's interesting because, with the kind of gauntlet now of all these all-star games, right? We were kind of inundated with information all of the sudden about a lot of these prospects, right? While people like yourself have been studying them all year long, breaking down the tape. That's why I wanted to talk to you, because I am one of those people who is certainly catching up right now as far as all this talent. And if we're being honest, I'm looking at the defensive side of the ball because there's a new defensive coordinator in Green Bay that honestly I don't know a whole lot about. I've obviously read about his history and his kind of path to Green Bay, but I wanted to pick your brain about what kind of changes and maybe personnel changes we can expect to see on that side of the ball in Green Bay, starting with what do you suspect is going to be his focal point when it comes to, rushing the quarterback? Because I know we've come from a scheme under Joe Barry where it was very kind of front four dependent, as it were. And I'm not so sure, everyone getting excited about a quote more aggressive defense. I'm not so sure much is going to change in that regard. What do you think?
Well, firstly, don't get so discouraged, as these all-star games are often the starting block for many in the NFL world. As
Right.
far as the calendar goes, it's tough to be experts in the college world and the NFL. This is where the calendar takes you. Typically, you're starting the all-star game, so we'll all catch up. Don't worry there. But as far as the recent news, bringing in Halfley in the Green Bay, we can certainly look in the rear view, watch a lot of his film, watch a lot of his tapes, get some semblance of schemes and philosophy, try to project forward, while also leaving that blank slate of you can be somebody different. He's never been an NFL defensive coordinator. We've never seen him go up against NFL quarterbacks in these offenses. He has the chance to be somebody completely different. But you can look backwards and try to get some semblance of who he was. And we saw a high volume man coverage defensive scheme with a lot of exotics 5 and 6 man pressure schemes. And those are the two main pillars of difference from Joe Barry, particularly on third down, particularly in the red zone, those critical downs where Joe Barry believed a little bit more of loose, keep it in front of you, prevent explosives, try to rally to the ball, let your front do the work. A lot of 4-man, drop 8 rushes, things like that. While Halfley is a little bit more aggressive. Wants to have sticky man coverage on the back end, try to force that ball out with extra rushers, and hopefully that coverage can hold up in 2-3 seconds, and hopefully that ball comes out. Always quick to remember, important to remember, no defensive scheme is perfect. No defensive scheme covers everything, or else everyone would play it every down. So it's a chessboard.
Right.
Pick and choose your vulnerabilities and your strengths. So with this man coverage pressure scheme, there are vulnerabilities. It leaves your corners a little bit more on islands, less protection over the top, and you can get beat for more explosives. Remember the Dom Capers era? A lot more exotic blitzes, a lot more man coverage. We saw coverage busts, confusions, balls going over the top, and all Packers Nation wanted was conservative. Let's keep it in front. Let's play zone. This is the cyclical nature of defenses in the NFL. You cannot win. Just when you ebb one way, you want to flow the other way. So I think it's always just important to remember there is no perfect sauce or perfect formula to stopping NFL offenses. I think the best defenses have the balance. Not that you're just all out man pressure like Wink Martindale or Brian Flores, or you're just conservative, like the Ed Donatell's and Joe Barry's of the world. The best ones are the balance. The Jim Schwartz's of the world, the Steve Spags of the world, the Lou Anarumas of the world, where you're just not man. You're not just zone. You're not just a base rush team. You're not a pressure team. You're a little bit of everything. And I think that's what we're going to get from Halfley. I think he's going to cater to his scheme and cater to who he's playing against. And I think that's what you want out of a defensive coordinator. You don't want to just be a vanilla chocolate type of guy. You want to kind of live in that swirling blizzard world. And I think that's what you're going to get. And that's a good thing.
That is the dream, right? Especially when it comes to just muddying the waters for the quarterback, right? I think too often with Barry, we certainly saw that game against the Buccaneers where the picture was there pre-snap and a little changed post-snap, and you knew exactly where you needed to go with the ball as the quarterback. And I'm with you in the sense that I do think, again, looking at his history, I think Halfley will be a little bit more multiple and a little bit more situationally kind of adept as far as mixing and matching and trying to not just match up with the offense, but maybe hopefully take advantage of them. If you're looking at the roster right now, you're talking about, a potential for more sticky man coverage, right? Or at least being asked to do that. Do you think they have the horses they need? Or is this something where there's a good bet they're going to dive into this talent pool in the draft?
And I know what people think, scheme change, coverage concept change, the corners are the ones that cover. Well, Jair Alexander is a superstar. He could play any scheme. Eric Stokes came from a man coverage background at Georgia. Carrington Valentine was a man coverage guy, a cover two guy at times at Kentucky. So these are corners that have some man coverage ability. It's actually the linebackers and safeties that I think will take a more drastic and different tone, as they're most often underneath zone players and not in man coverage assignments. So I think catering your linebackers, safeties, nickels to finding more guys that can play man coverage in those position rooms, particularly off the heels of the press conference saying a lot of those parts are going to be interchangeable and maybe not have particular, positional designations, which means you better be a good zone player, a good tackler, a good blitzer, a good man coverage guy, or suddenly we need some perfect players out here. So I think it's actually the safeties, linebackers, nickels that will take on a little bit of a different tone. And I know when we talk coverage, people think corners. I think it's the other guys in the middle of the field that will feel much different and look much different on the field in 24.
I'm glad you brought that up because for me, and it's something we've talked a lot about at Cheesehead TV basically since the end of the season. To me, and we heard Brian somewhat mention this in his press conference yesterday regarding how much kind of 4-2-5 or nickel defense is played in the league now. It makes that slot corner so important, right? I mean, he's practically a starter in this day and age when it comes to NFL football. I suspect that there's probably a chance that Packers move kind of forward at that spot. Keyshawn Nixon has manned the nickel for the last couple of years. Do you suspect there's talent enough in this draft to kind of earmark, okay, we're going to go get our nickel here? Or is that something you think probably all avenues are open, free agency, draft, trade, what have you?
I think all avenues are open, but it's a lot of times a position that the position finds you. So you might be a undersized linebacker that can kick out there, or an oversized corner that's good in run support, or a safety with some coverage skills, as the league is going to a lot of that big nickel where you're putting a safety in that spot because those small nickel corners were being attacked by big slot receivers and the run game. So you want a little bit more size in there. So I think all avenues are open. Certainly free agency has some candidates. Its own roster has some candidates on the Packers. But in the draft, there's candidates at every position, like we had mentioned. So some guys I love at that nickel spot. Michigan's own Mike Sandstrill, I thought had a great season in the nickel for the Michigan national champions. Javon Bullard from the Georgia Bulldogs, two-time national champion, just had a great week down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. Two really tough, feisty nickel players that are good in run support, good man coverage, and excellent play speed and athleticism, which you really need in the middle of the field there. So I think there's going to be a lot of safeties and corners with some toughness you're going to want to put there. And there's certainly plenty of them in this draft, last draft, next draft. It is a deep position pool, but not an easy position to play. Obviously, that's a tough spot.
It really is. I mean, you're out there in space. You have to, like you said, you got to stick your nose in there and run support.
And Aaron, it drives me crazy that these all-pro teams, Pro Bowl teams, can we put a nickel spot there?
Right?
Base defense is played about 25% across the NFL, which means sub package is out there 75% of the time.
Sub package is your starters.
We don't need a 7-man front on these Pro Bowl teams where not to mention you're mixing in edge rushers and off-ball guys.
I was just going to say we finally got edge somewhat delineated.
It's a mess out there, but we need nickels that are playing 80-90% of the snaps out there all the time, and the nickels across the league are incredible. There's some really interesting ones with high volume backgrounds, some that came out of nowhere like Kenny Moore's and Keyshawn Nixon's of the world. You got Arthur Millette out there for Baltimore as a journeyman. It's fun to kind of get a landscape of all the different nickels across the NFL.
Looking at, kind of drawing back from that, but looking at all three levels of the defense, if you're Brian Gutekunst and this is your roster and you're thinking positional value, we talk about or we hear about this a lot on offense, especially when it comes to running backs, right? The age of running backs don't matter, though that seems to be kind of trending the other way now. When you look at defense and you're trying to weigh your options as far as where to invest, especially premium picks, Packers are sitting at 25. Let's say you've got the safety from Minnesota, whose name is totally escaping me at the moment.
Tyler Nubin,
who has been kind of hovering around that mark, so to speak, if you look at most mocks. And then you look at someone like Byron Murphy with Texas, who I absolutely love that kid. And I love the idea of adding to your defensive front, your down linemen, trying to own the line of scrimmage, right? Where do you fall as far as positional value and where you think, Ben Fennell, that you're going to get more bang for your buck, or you're going to be able to affect your defense a little bit more?
Well, there's going to be two different tones to that. There's going to be positional value and depth within its own draft class in evaluating, can you get that player later on, and what is the drop off, after that prospect? And then there's your positional value based on how you value that position in general, based on your roster and salary cap, which that safety position is so interesting across the NFL. Nobody wants to pay safeties anymore.
No, right?
Nobody wants to draft safeties high anymore.
Nope.
So it's a critical spot on the field. You want them to do everything, but not value them. And then all of a sudden, these guys get taken in the early second round, the Antoine Winfields, the Javon Hollands of the world, the Brian Branches of the world, and they're superstars.
Change defenses.
No question.
Exactly.
And you're like, but they weren't first-round picks. So I, kind of push back on that just a little bit to say those safeties have to do a lot of things on the field. They're valuable players. You can spend some high draft capital on them. Yeah, do you have to break the bank with that second contract and give them Jamal Adams and Derwin James money and Budda Baker money? No. So I think maybe it's the contract and the money being spent. But as far as putting positional value and getting them on the field and finding high value players, you got to go get them. So I think Tyler Nubin is absolutely going to be in play late in the first round. And I think some of these other, safety nickel hybrids could be in that conversation as well. So I know some people want to push it to the second round, but it's going to take a conversation about those high value trench players, the D tackles, the edge rushers, the tackles that they just feel like have a bigger drop off in talent once you get a bit later in the draft. So that's why those players get thrusted up. And that's why those safety positions have kind of taken that black eye over the last 5 years or so of, kind of getting pushed down the board.
Well, and it's interesting, kind of adding on to that as far as the Packers, right, sitting at 25. And I've had this a lot in my chats already, and I can't believe we've still have, 3 months to go until this thing actually happens. But the idea that, okay, just trade back, which I always find kind of funny because that's very easily said. You definitely need a dance partner, etc. How much does the fifth-year option weigh if you're the GM sitting there going, okay, to your point, maybe I can get either this player or a similar player, say down in round 2, I can pick up another pick, etc. Yet you then give up that fifth year of control because you don't have that first-round selection. Is that something that could tilt the balance towards, okay, I'm going to make this pick rather than trade, or is that too good a value to pass up as far as getting 2 cracks at the plate?
32 GMs probably give you 32 answers, add in 33 for myself and 34 for you. So, I think it's really tough. I think there's some guys that have that long view approach. And then there are some GMs that say, give me 3 years of good player, just give me a good player. We're not talking about year 4 and 5. What am I getting years 1, 2, 3 first? And let's figure out if they can actually play in the league first before we're talking about that fifth-year option. So I think some have that longer view approach. Some have the more recency approach. And a lot of that comes into your current team state, whether you're trying to win now, whether you're in cap hell, whether you're trying to plan for the future, whether you're stashing a depth piece to start later and things like that. So I think when you look to a Packers team, taking a quarterback while you have a starting quarterback, certainly that fifth-year option is important. That's more of a down-the-road approach. But if it's somebody you're looking to play right now, that fifth year maybe isn't so important. We need high-level play year 1, year 2, 3 in the window we're trying to win. So I know I kind of just danced around the clock there of an answer, but
you're right though. It's going to depend on your situation, right?
Yeah. So I didn't want to put a philosophy stamp for the entire league. So just kind of speaking to the different tones and narratives there.
It's funny though, like you're talking about getting immediate contributions, and it is so kind of prevalent in Green Bay over the course of the last couple of decades, where they have been a long view team, like whether it's been under Ted Thompson or Brian Gutekunst, which makes it all the more surprising to see how immediately they felt the effects of not only this draft class, but last year's draft class. How quickly do you think that may not changes their approach, but Does their approach change? Has their approach changed? Because I've been asked a couple times now, like, why are these classes suddenly just coming in and ripping it up in the NFL? Whereas certainly under Goody and mostly under Ted, it would take a little bit of time for these guys to mature and come into the league a year or two before they're really contributing. I mean, hell, almost every guy from this class contributed in some way or another. I mean, that has not been the norm in Green Bay. Have you seen something change in that regard to their approach, who they've taken, or is it just they've kind of hit on their picks these last couple of years?
Well, part of it's roster construction philosophy, and part of it's opportunity and giving those guys chances of saying,
True.
we're not going to get the vets. We're going to go see what these lottery tickets have. And suddenly you're in week 12, 13, 14, you're realizing, oh, some of these numbers are hitting on these lottery tickets. And essentially that's what all these young players are. But are you ever going to get a chance to play the number? You know, and I think the Packers played a lot of numbers this year, which was exciting. And moving forward, you kind of have some house money right now because the timeline of playing those tickets and figuring out who can play, who can't play, who can play in spots, who can't play in spots, who could be trusted and not, you're ahead of that curve right now. So now you have some house money where I think you have some young players ahead of the timeline. You kind of have some truth serum for who you can rely on. And now you can just fill in some gaps for elsewhere, I think, on that kind of roster construction, which is really exciting. So I don't know if it's necessarily a full face philosophy change as much as it's just how the roster was constructed the last 2-3 years, which wasn't always perfect. You know, there were some contending teams with Rodgers late where it was like, go add some vets. We don't want to play lottery tickets with this
Right.
type of team.
Right.
But last year with the no expectations, new quarterback, let's play some lottery tickets. Let's see what we have out there. And suddenly the Jaden Reeds of the world and the Dontavian Wicks of the world and Carl Brookses. And suddenly this young talent got opportunities to show, and they didn't always fall on their face, and they really flashed their ability. And that's exciting. Not all young players across the league get that. And I think studying these prospects and projecting careers and comps, so important to take into account luck and opportunity in this game. And so many cases and scenarios of the past where guys got opportunities that not everybody else gets. And, you can point to Tom Brady's of the world, or, you can point to, Joe Shit the Ragdoll that never got the chance. So, I think it's really just important to say so much is opportunity and luck as far as how your career pans out.
That's something that I try to kind of reiterate every year, especially at this time with the draft industrial complex being what it is. It's so easy to look at the college tape and then make your lists, and people have their rankings and things like that. But it's like, none of that takes into account what their NFL situation is going to be, whether it's who their coaching staff is, what the scheme they're running, who are their teammates, what are they being asked to do, all of that in concert with all of the ability and the production you saw in college, and trying to project how that fits into your program. It's the projection aspect that I think often gets lost. And I understand it because we can't know where they're going to end up, right? So then we are kind of slaves to the college tape. But to your point, the opportunity and the ability to get on the field, maybe if Jaden Reed goes someplace else, he doesn't get that opportunity. But he gets that opportunity in Green Bay and breaks Sterling Sharp's rookie reception record, right? I mean, that is such a huge component that a lot of times, especially draft coverage and the like, kind of gets lost. And I'm really glad you brought that up.
And really quick, I feel like a broken record with this, but I feel like I am one of the forefront, founders of saying and reminding people of humanizing these players.
Yep.
And try predicting the career of any 20 to 25-year-old, not just a professional athlete. It is a turbulent time in their lives. So not just physical ability, but the responsibility, the temptation, the diet, take care of your body, just being an adult and dealing with all the things in life. I know some people think, oh, sex, drugs, and alcohol. No, just eating normal. I've heard of professional athletes addicted to fast food. Heard of guys addicted to candy. Heard guys that couldn't wake up with an alarm. So I love the human aspect to all of it. Success and failure in the NFL is rarely about physical ability. So there's so much else out there, and these young guys kind of going through life, navigating life. Oh, yeah, and being a professional athlete with all that pressure as well. So these are humans, and there's a lot of reasons for success and failure in the NFL, and a lot of it doesn't happen on the field. And I think the Tucker Kraft stories of the world are great. Guys that have all the ability, the mental side was clearly holding them back early. He was a tight end from an FCS school. There's a learning curve in the NFL. Patience is important too. And these guys, once they slow down mentally, get a grasp of their life and being a professional, suddenly you can play faster and more confident and show everybody why you were drafted and why you can be an NFL player.
I mean, Tucker Kraft, you talk about, to my eyes, the most improved player on the team from what we were watching
But it's
this
like, Aaron,
summer.
he wasn't getting whooped early. He didn't know what to do sometimes.
He was running
he didn't have
around.
His assignment.
He was running around a lot. Yeah.
And Musgrave's the same with alignments, landmarks, hot routes, route conversions, things like that. The mental side of it. He has all the athletic ability, but so much of this game is mental, and so much of this game happens off the field in your preparation. And these are humans. These are 22-year-olds, 23-year-olds trying to figure things out. And a team like the Packers, where these young guys are thrusted in right away with not a lot of veteran presence to kind of guide them along. Man, they were drowning early, but it's fun to see that kind of maturation right in front of your eyes.
100%. And it's funny you mentioned, like, Kraft wasn't getting whooped, not physically. However, it's fun to go back and watch and compare the tape early in the season when they're asking him to go across formation and take on that defensive end, right? And his technique is so poor that he is whipped instantly, like, but just via technique. To you go to that Vikings game on Sunday night late in the season, he's absolutely just owning people with this same concept. And he has completely changed his game and honed his technique in the matter of, what, 11, 12 weeks. I've seen guys improve. I talk about this all the time. Like Brandon Jackson, when he came into the league, was that first summer the poorest pass blocking back I have ever seen in a Packers training camp. I mean, it was ugly. By the time he left Green Bay, he was the best pass blocking back I had ever witnessed. I mean, the growth was very real. The growth was entirely real, but it happened over a very kind of elongated time period. Whereas this year, there were so many rookies who started a little shaky and a little kind of all over the map. The way they were almost to a man able to improve from what we saw this summer to what we were witnessing down the stretch in 2023, that's, I'm not going to say unprecedented, but for so many guys to do it all at once, it was striking to me.
Yeah, it was overwhelming, really. And,
I mean, really.
And to keep touching on some of the philosophies of your draft industrial complex, every time a player goes back out onto the field, every game is a new opportunity to tell a story. So don't go in looking for your biases. Look to see what the tape tells you. And remember, the tape can change. The players can change. They could get better. Got news for you. They could get worse too. So I think just letting the film speak to you every time you go and study these players, study the college players, just give them opportunity to let the tape talk to you. Don't talk to the tape and look for what you want to find. So I think these young guys, especially in Green Bay, each week was a new story. And it was so much fun to watch. A little frustrating at times, as this team loves playing to their opponent to go beat the Chiefs, the Lions, and the Cowboys, and to get your pants pulled down against the Giants and the Raiders, and to give up 30 against the Panthers. It was frustrating out there. But each week was its own personality and its own story for each of these young players. Give them a chance to be somebody different, and take that note into the kind of studying of draft prospects.
I absolutely love it. Ben, I really cannot thank you enough for the time today. And hopefully we're going to be doing these, once a week or so leading up to the draft. Really happy to have you here on Cheesehead TV. Thanks so much for the time, man.
Thanks for having me on, Aaron.